Anthony, thank you so much for joining me today in Cwmni Bach, which means the small company. So we get together occasionally with individuals and have a discussion about life and experiences. And today it's a chance for us at the Union of Welsh Independents to meet you, Anthony Reddie. So could you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I guess the most important thing to say, well, most important in my mind, is that I was born and brought up in Bradford, West Yorkshire. So although I've lived for 39 years in Birmingham, I'm not a Brummie. I mean, I like Birmingham. I like people who live here, but I'm not a Brummie. I'm a Yorkshireman in exile. Often said that you can take the man out of Yorkshire, but you can't take Yorkshire out of the man. And I mean, although I say that humorously, there's a sense in which a lot of the values and a lot of the things that have shaped me still come from my first 19 years of being born and brought up in Bradford. So my parents were part of the Windrush generation. So they came from the island of Jamaica in the late 50s, 57 and 59, respectively. They met in the UK. They didn't know each other in Jamaica. And they got married in 62. I'm their eldest child. So I was born in 1964. And I guess what has also shaped me, it's not just Yorkshire, but it's also been eldest child of immigrants. So you're always a kind of social guinea pig who's sort of trying to navigate different worlds. And so long before I came across the whole thing about post-colonial theories and notions of hybridity and being in between, I was kind of living that long before I read books about it, because there was always this sense of, so at home, my parents were sort of trying to recreate Jamaica, which is what migrants do. You try to recreate the place you come from. But of course, never exactly as it was, because like you're in a different place. So at home, it was very much kind of Jamaica, but yet out in the world with friends, it was very much working class Bradford. I was born particularly in the city of Bradford in Yorkshire. So that really has helped to shape my whole social identity. My parents went to they went to a Methodist church, so I was baptized into the Methodist church. And I think the two things that have always gone hand in hand for me have been essentially Labour politics. So my dad was an ardent trade unionist. He was a works convener and then a shop steward for the General and Municipal Workers Union. And I'm named after Tony Benn. So Anthony, as in Anthony George Reddie, comes from my dad named me after Tony Benn, his favourite politician. So I guess that and nonconformist Christianity, Methodism, relatively low evangelical Methodism have been the two threads that have gone sort of hand in hand, really, in my life, really. So long before I later became a Black liberation theologian, broadly speaking, understanding the world through the prism of my religious faith, but a faith that was very much informed by I think, Labour politics, thinking about resources, who owns them, thinking very much in terms of a bottom up and then a top-down way of looking at society and people in it. Went to university when I was almost 19, 1984, to Birmingham to read for a degree in church history, which I kind of hated at the time. I thought it was really boring. But looking back, it actually was a really, really good education and I was appreciated at the time. And I was very much involved in Christian Aid, student Christian movement, very much involved in, broadly speaking, humanitarian, progressive forms of faith, looking about Greek and
why did you think it was boring?
I mean, in fairness, I mean, I suppose a combination of two things. One is it was a very traditional place, so we looked at texts, we analysed texts. And for the most part, it was very much looking, it was mainly kind of European history, some of which I liked, but a lot of it wasn't really about me. But also, I think in fairness, although I said it was boring, the first time away from home, and I grew up in a very teetotaling, very strict sort of holiness upbringing. So I didn't go to nightclubs, didn't go to pubs, never really went out of the house. So once I was away from home for the first time off the leash, sort of realised that pubs were a lot more interested in the library. And so probably did not do a holy book work, which probably explains a very modest 2-2 degree I got. So looking back, it wasn't really, it wasn't as boring as I made out. I think I just wasn't that interested in the studies at that age 19, 20.
The clash of the two things, and then maybe the pushing of the two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if I had it all, if I had it to do again, I'd do it entirely differently. I'd work a lot harder and stuff, because I realized I had some really good teachers. I just didn't appreciate them at the time, basically, So, but however, what I did get during those 3 years at Birmingham was a passion for ministry. I knew it wasn't ordained ministry, but I did feel a sense of wanting to find a way in which I could apply my faith to social and political issues in the country. I was at university during the years of Thatcher, and just disagreed with everything she did. And at the time, I remember having this real existential challenge, because I genuinely, in the world I grew up in Bradford, East Bowling, I did not think you could be a social and political conservative and be a Christian. I still don't think you can be those two things, quite frankly, although quite a lot of people are, but I still, personally speaking, can't see how you can be a social conservative or political conservative and follow Jesus of Nazareth. But I definitely had not seen many people like that before I came to Birmingham. And that then is what I think then I then began to think about how my politics, Labour Party, and my faith were very much intertwined. The key thing that happened really during Birmingham was meeting a radical South African theologian who was in exile from the apartheid regime. So a guy called Itumeleng Masala. Masala was a Marxist Christian. And he probably had the biggest influence on me in that he taught us a class in biblical hermeneutics. And I literally have not seen the Bible the same way since, and not seen faith the same way since. That was probably the biggest influence on me. And then I got into community work, got into that community organising in Birmingham as a graduate once I left university. And then went back to Birmingham University initially to do an extramural course, at the time solely in order to help me to become a better community organiser. And never occurred to me that I might become an academic, certainly given the fact that I was less than a spectacular student as an undergraduate doing at Birmingham several years earlier. So when I went back and did postgraduate studies, suddenly things just clicked. I just became very hardworking, very determined. Probably helped by the fact that at postgraduate level, rather than doing courses that are thrust in front of you, you can choose what you want to do. And I just saw this gaping hole for trying to develop a form of Black liberation theology that spoke to people in the UK, particularly people like myself, whose parents were born in the Caribbean, but you're born in Britain. And what does it mean to think about migration, empire, identity, split loyalties, all that. And so I began to write. I wrote my PhD thesis, and then I wrote my first books. And then, as I said, the rest is history.
So you talked about the fact that you did some community work as well. Has that community work continued?
Yes, it has, but not in the way in which I used to do it. So I used to be very much a very committed activist. And by that, I would mean that I would run workshops. I did, I think all the different things we did. We would do kind of immigration advice for people who were sort of trying to navigate their way from other places into Britain through our very officious and quite frankly racist home office, would do stuff like after school clubs, would do stuff like adult literacy and numeracy, all that kind of stuff. I don't do as much of that now as I used to do, which is something I reflect on, because I think one of the criticisms that is often made of liberation theologians is that we end up kind of sitting in classrooms writing books for very, very well-educated posh kids, and don't do the same kind of activism that spurred us on to write in the first place. I try to mitigate that by, I still do some work in communities. So I still run a mentoring group. So I work with a group of Black young men, well, boys to men, helping them to think about life choices and think about their journeys as human beings, really. And then because I'm connected with lots of friends who are ministers, I go to churches and sometimes I do Bible studies and guest preach. But I'm not as active in community work as I used to be. But I still try to keep my hand in just to get a sense of what the real issues going on in the ground. Well, so on the ground, so to speak.
Yes, of course. Can you tell me, in a fairly brief summary, or tell us what Black liberation theology is?
Yeah. So essentially, it is a belief that the God revealed in Jesus Christ is committed to liberation and social transformation of all people who are on the margins, who are being oppressed. But that God has a particular relationship with people of African descent because of the long history of slavery and colonialism. So one of the key things that comes out of Black liberation theology is the critique of the way in which a white Jesus was sent all across the world and across the empire. And it's the belief that Jesus was historically, as an oppressed Jew during Roman occupation, someone who was mounting a revolution of love, and mainly of love, but a revolution nonetheless, trying to transform people and transform systems and structures. And if Jesus is revealed in God as the same yesterday, today, and forever, then that same God is revealed in Jesus now and is on the side of those who are marginalized and oppressed, and particularly, not in any special way, but certainly on the side of those who have been told that they are second-class citizens because of the color of their skin. So essentially, that's Black liberation theology. The most famous advocate of that, in a popular sense, would be someone like Martin Luther King, who would be the most popular exponent of it. The person who is my, I guess, biggest hero has been James Cone. So James H. Cone, C-O-N-E. Cone wrote the first Black theology book in 1969 called Black Theology and Black Power, and then effectively helped to create this discipline, is a systematic analysis of how the gospel of Jesus Christ should always be on the side of those who are told that they're nobodies, and should be seeking to empower them, as well as trying to bring down and dismantle unjust systems.
Can we, as white people, engage with this in a meaningful way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the two critical ways in which I've always seen this as being a broader coalition is when you then put issues of class and gender into the mix, and then also then think about nationalism and power. So the way in which white people can contribute is really two ways, really. One is to be interested with people who are fighting racism, to say, well, actually, racism is a common problem for all of us. Actually, no one really benefits from racism, because the power it takes to try and suppress someone is the power that can be used much more creatively to enable all people to flourish. So actually, being anti-racist is, I think, what all people should be. That's the first thing. But then secondly, it's to use then some of the parallel analysis to look at issues of class and gender, and also nationality as well, in order to deconstruct and challenge those systems that effectively oppress everybody. So, for example, in 2019, I wrote a book called Theologizing Brexit. And at the heart of the book, Theologizing Brexit, was my critique of white English nationalism. And I say that the white English nationalism of Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage and various, on the whole, posh, white, rich men is a theology that only benefits them. Doesn't benefit anyone else, doesn't benefit poor white people. Hell no, it doesn't. Doesn't benefit poor black people, doesn't benefit migrants, doesn't benefit women, because like all of them are sexist and patriarchal. So actually, if we think in terms of coalition, if we think in terms of how we work together, find our commonalities, then that's how white people can contribute. And I think one of the things I've always had a real affinity with Welsh and Scottish people is because Welsh nationalism and Scottish nationalism is not the same as English nationalism. So I've always felt there be a kind of a kinship. So I remember the first time when I worked briefly for CWM, and I did came to Swansea, I think, like to visit UWI officers. And I think, oh gosh, now who was the president at the time?
Was it
Older
Dyfrig?
guy beard.
Yeah, Dyfrig, yes.
Dyfrig. So we're having a conversation with him. And he said to me, and this is where I said to students, context is everything. So you can say one thing in one place, and it means one thing, but he says something in a different place, it's a different thing. So I remember kind of meeting him, and he gave me a big hug, and we were chatting, and he said, oh, Anthony, I love you, he said. Like, you're not properly English. Now, I know exactly what he means. And to me, that's affirmation, because in another place, it'd be, how do you mean I'm not properly? I mean, that's a racist statement. What he's saying is, you're not a white English person who comes with all the trappings of colonialism power. We have a shared history of colonialism, Caribbean, Wales. It says, you're not properly English. I take that not as a slur, as affirmation, because what we have is this shared sense of what does it mean, therefore, to be post-colonial, to be fighting colonialism as part of that matrix of how power imposes itself on people and oppresses them. So there are lots of ways in which we can be in solidarity with each other. What we have to be careful of is how the power structures, the Goves and the Johnsons of this world, must play a kind of divide and rule process. So try to get the different groups to fight each other when actually it's a common enemy of those who hold power, well, both political power and economic power, and impose it upon others.
Well, that's a call to arms for us, I think. I just absolutely, no, I absolutely agree with everything you say there. You still live in Birmingham now, but you're a professor at Oxford at present. Tell me a little bit about that. Yeah,
well, that is still something that I find quite bemusing on a daily basis for lots of reasons. Firstly, because I never expected it. So, if you'd have said to me 10 years ago, oh, by the way, you'll end up and you'll be a professor in Oxford University, I'd have thought you were utterly crazy. It was never something that I ever envisaged. And also getting the job was nothing short of a miracle. So just the other day, I was talking to a friend of ours, a mutual friend, about a job that's going in one of the colleges. And all the people shortlisted are all Oxford graduates. All of them have studied in Oxford, been in Oxford for years. So when I applied for the job as the director of the Oxford Centre for Religion and Culture, having never studied in Oxford, never lived in Oxford, never been here in any guise other than a tourist, I genuinely did not think I had a cat in hell's chance. Which I think in hindsight was actually quite liberating, because I think there's something about genuinely thinking you do not have a chance that is quite freeing. So I just turned up and I was myself, and I gave very honest answers. I figured, well, I'm not going to get the job anyway, so I may as well just tell them what I think. So I just tell them what I thought. So when they rang me a couple of days later and said, well, actually, we're going to offer you the job, I was like, oh, wow. I did not see that coming. And I have to say, I enjoy it, but it's always for me having to check yourself, because I think what Oxford and Cambridge are very good at doing, and I see them as different sides of the same coin. So I'm not partisan about one or the other. I think that I've often described them as being whiteness on steroids. So basically, if you think about what white privilege looks like in the likes of Boris Johnson, then this is the heightened version of it, you know. And then there I am as a working class oik from a comprehensive school who studied at Birmingham University, right in the middle of it. So always conscious of two things. One is that my job is to be the fly in the ointment. It is to be there and to critique and challenge and subvert. I'm very clear about that. That's what I try to do. But I'm also aware of the fact that it's also a place that can seduce you as well. A place where if you're not careful, like, you soon think that dressing up in gowns and wearing silly hats and parading through and parading across halls and drinking lots of wine at high table is kind of normal. And of course it's not normal. That's what normal people don't do that. But actually, it does have a way, if you're not careful, of sort of de-radicalizing you, because like you get so used to being part of the establishment and so used to being treated with a certain kind of deference that if you're not careful, you kind of end up believing. So part of staying in Birmingham and not moving to Oxford has been to remain with the people I have been friends with for years, so that they can tell me if I'm turning into a pompous ass, then they will see it and they will put me down a peg or two before it gets too serious.
How's that going, the pompous ass thing? Just the right side of it?
I think I still am. But you probably need to talk to my friends, because they can probably see it better than I can. I think I'm still okay, but you know, who knows?
Good. Well, this summer you're coming to the Union of Welsh Independents annual general meetings, and you're going to be delivering a lecture for us. We're very excited. So we're so pleased that we've got to know you a little bit today. Can you give us a sense maybe of what you'll be talking about, or are you going to save your
okay
stuff?
No, I mean, yeah, I know what I'll be talking about. So it's this alliteration that I've often been working for a number of years in my own experience. So I'll probably tell him stories. So when I say it's a lecture, it won't be a lecture. It'll just be a series of insights from my own experience, storytelling, and then invite the audience to make the comparison between what I'm saying, and hopefully it will resonate with them. But a number of years ago, I read a book by Emmanuel Larty. The book was called In Living Colour. And Larty was intercultural approaches of pastoral theology and pastoral care. And in it, he's particularly interested in those of us who have hybrid identities in terms of living between different things and trying to negotiate change. How do you hold in tension the root, R-O-O-T? All of us come from places. We have places that form us. And the root, R-O-U-T-E, in terms of the journey we're taking and the new insights and new experiences we're coming across. And for me, I think part of trying to be a Christian, trying to be a theologian, trying to be a person of faith in general, but I think particularly if you're living in places with these different identities held in tension, is how do you hold the root? So the places that have shaped you, the ways in which particular identities become important to you, but then acknowledge that the R-O-U-T-E, that none of us are static. We are constantly on the move and we're meeting new people. And how do you hold in tension that sense of wanting to maintain that which has helped you to be who you are, but yet be open to new influences and new challenges, on the basis that none of us are stuck in one place ever, just being one thing. So it's that kind of tension, and really what I'll invite, I think, the audience to reflect on, certainly as a Welsh-speaking church in Wales, is on the back of my individual stories. What does that then look like for Wales that's changing? You know, that has an identity and a history, and certainly a language that I think is hugely important. I mean, I remember, again, first time, well, not the time I came to Swansea, but when I first started with CWM, and there was, I think, an assembly for churches in the Europe region. And I remember sitting in the bar with friends from UWI and also friends from the Welsh Presbyterian Church, a group of people all speaking Welsh. And I remember I was there with an English colleague who found it really annoying. He says, but a lot of people speaking Welsh. And I'm like, well, that's because that's their first language. What's your problem? And it's like, well, like, why? I'm not speaking English. And I said, well, because I don't want to speak English, that's why. It's because that's their first language. English, which is the only language I speak, which is an interesting tension for myself, is the language of colonization. I understand why they want to sit with each other and speak in Welsh. The issue isn't that they're speaking Welsh. The issue is that you can't speak it. And therefore, you're upset because they're speaking a language. If you learn to speak it, then like, you could go join them, but you can't. So, but your issue is that they should change how they speak to accommodate you when you're not even with them, sat around the bar having this conversation. Now, to me, that never bothered me because I could see the post-colonial cultural and political issues that my white English friend could not see because, let's face it, 78% of the union is made up of Englishness. And because we often then slide Englishness into Britishness and never see that actually these are two different things. And so most English friends of mine don't realize how English they are until they find themselves talking with other people from other parts of the union who have very distinct identities. Now, you know, I mean, that doesn't bother me because I grew up with that being Black. So I grew up in a context where I knew what it was like to feel different. So there's lots of shared sort of resonances and empathy there. But I also, I think, want to offer a challenge to say, okay, well, how do you hold on to that, but then not get stuck into a particular moment? Because, you know, I mean, Wales 2023 is certainly not Wales 1950, whatever that was. So how then do you change but maintain your values, but not then get stuck into a sense of, but like you're always looking backwards because the past seemed a lot better than the present. Essentially, that's what they're saying. But with some more jokes thrown in.
We look forward to the jokes. I am energized by what you've just said. And we are so happy that we're going to be welcoming your dynamic self to our midst in Wrexham and Rhos. Anthony Reddie, thank you so much for joining me today in Cwmni Bach.
Thank you. It's been a genuine pleasure. Thank you very much.